Grace Thompson had always tried to maintain peace within her husband Michael's complicated family, but watching her sister-in-law Stephanie manipulate their dying mother during her final months was pushing Grace beyond her breaking point and forcing her to confront the ugly reality of family greed and elder abuse. At 34, Grace was a registered nurse who had spent the past 2 years helping care for her mother-in-law Dorothy, a 78-year-old retired school teacher who had been battling advanced Alzheimer's disease while living in the family home that had been in the Thompson family for 3 generations. Dorothy had always been a sharp, independent woman who had raised 5 children as a single mother after her husband died young, building a modest but comfortable life through careful saving and smart investments that had grown into an estate worth nearly $2 million by the time her cognitive decline began affecting her daily functioning and decision-making abilities. Michael was Dorothy's youngest son and had always been her favorite, a gentle soul who worked as a high school counselor and had inherited his mother's compassionate nature, while his older sister Stephanie was a completely different personality, aggressive, materialistic, and resentful that her mother had always favored Michael despite Stephanie's constant demands for attention and financial support throughout her adult life. Grace had noticed changes in Dorothy's behavior and medical condition that seemed inconsistent with the normal progression of Alzheimer's disease, particularly episodes of extreme confusion and disorientation that would come and go unpredictably, along with physical symptoms like nausea, dizziness, and sleep disturbances that didn't match the typical pattern of cognitive decline that Grace had observed in other patients. During her nursing career, Stephanie had moved into Dorothy's house 6 months earlier, claiming that she wanted to provide full-time care for her aging mother, but Grace suspected that Stephanie's real motivation was gaining control over Dorothy's finances and ensuring that she would inherit the majority of the estate when Dorothy passed away. The family dynamics had become increasingly tense as Stephanie began isolating Dorothy from other family members, claiming that visitors were too stimulating for someone in Dorothy's condition, while simultaneously scheduling frequent meetings with lawyers and financial advisors who came to the house to discuss estate planning and will modifications that Dorothy supposedly wanted to make. Grace's nursing instincts told her that something was seriously wrong with the situation, especially when she noticed that Dorothy's symptoms seemed to worsen significantly after Stephanie gave her daily medications, and that Dorothy's periods of clarity and normal behavior often occurred when Stephanie was away from the house running errands or attending appointments. During one of Dorothy's lucid moments, the elderly woman confided in Grace that she was scared of Stephanie and didn't understand why she was being asked to sign so many legal documents that she couldn't read clearly, admitting that she often felt confused and sick after taking the pills that Stephanie insisted were prescribed by her doctor for her condition. Grace immediately suspected that Stephanie might be drugging Dorothy with substances that weren't prescribed or were being administered in incorrect dosages, creating artificial symptoms that would make Dorothy appear more cognitively impaired than she actually was, providing legal cover for will changes and financial decisions that Dorothy wouldn't normally agree to make. Grace began secretly monitoring Dorothy's medication routine, taking photos of pill bottles and documenting the timing of Dorothy's symptoms relative to when she received medications from Stephanie, building a comprehensive record that showed clear patterns of behavioral changes that correlated directly with specific drug administrations. The investigation became more urgent when Grace discovered that Dorothy had recently signed a new will that left 90% of her estate to Stephanie, with Michael receiving only a token inheritance despite having been Dorothy's primary emotional support and caregiver for years before Stephanie's sudden interest in providing care became apparent. Grace also found evidence that Dorothy had signed over power of attorney to Stephanie, giving her complete control over Dorothy's finances and medical decisions, along with real estate documents that transferred ownership of the family home to Stephanie, while allowing Dorothy to continue living there as a tenant rather than an owner. The legal documents had been prepared by a lawyer who specialized in elder law but had a questionable reputation for helping families navigate inheritance disputes in ways that sometimes pushed ethical boundaries, and Grace suspected that Stephanie had chosen this particular attorney specifically because he would be willing to overlook obvious signs of elder abuse and coercion. Grace's most damning discovery came when she secretly tested some of Dorothy's pills and found that several medications that Stephanie claimed were prescribed for Alzheimer's treatment were actually powerful sedatives and anti-anxiety drugs that weren't approved for Dorothy's condition and were being administered in dosages that could cause serious cognitive impairment and physical symptoms that mimicked advanced dementia. Stephanie had been systematically poisoning her own mother with prescription drugs that she had obtained illegally, creating artificial symptoms that would support her claims that Dorothy was too mentally impaired to make rational decisions about her estate and financial affairs. The elder abuse was comprehensive and calculating, with Stephanie using her mother's drugged state to force her to sign legal documents, make financial decisions that benefited Stephanie exclusively, and even record video statements where Dorothy appeared to confirm her wishes to leave everything to the daughter who was providing such devoted care during her final illness. Armed with evidence of systematic elder abuse, financial exploitation, and possibly attempted murder, Grace faced the difficult decision of whether to confront Stephanie directly or go immediately to law enforcement with her findings, knowing that any delay could result in Dorothy's death or further legal complications that would make it harder to prove the extent of Stephanie's crimes. Grace chose to contact Adult Protective Services and the local police, simultaneously providing them with her detailed documentation of Dorothy's medication schedule, the suspicious legal documents, and her professional assessment that Dorothy was being systematically poisoned by someone with access to her food and medications. The investigation moved quickly because Grace's evidence was so thorough and professionally documented, with law enforcement obtaining search warrants for the house and Dorothy's medical records while arranging for Dorothy to be immediately moved to a secure medical facility where she could receive proper care while detoxing from the drugs that had been affecting her cognitive function. The search of Dorothy's house revealed a cache of prescription drugs that Stephanie had been obtaining illegally through various sources, including medications that were prescribed for other people and drugs that had been purchased through online pharmacies without valid prescriptions, demonstrating the sophisticated nature of her poisoning scheme and her knowledge of which substances would create the symptoms she needed to justify her control over Dorothy's affairs. Dorothy's condition improved dramatically once she was removed from Stephanie's care and the illegal drugs were cleared from her system, with her cognitive function returning to levels that were much more consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's rather than the advanced dementia that Stephanie had been claiming justified all the legal and financial changes that had been made to Dorothy's estate plan. The medical evidence was overwhelming, with toxicology tests confirming that Dorothy had been systematically poisoned with multiple substances over a period of several months, and psychiatric evaluations showing that she had sufficient mental capacity to make informed decisions about her estate when she wasn't being drugged by her daughter. Stephanie was arrested on charges that included elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, illegal distribution of prescription drugs, and attempted murder, with prosecutors arguing that her systematic poisoning of Dorothy constituted a deliberate attempt to cause her death while stealing her estate through fraudulent legal manipulations. The criminal trial received significant media attention as an example of how elder abuse could be perpetrated by family members who were trusted to provide care, with Grace testifying as the key witness about her observations and the evidence she had gathered that exposed Stephanie's crimes and probably saved Dorothy's life. Stephanie's defense team tried to argue that she had been providing legitimate care and that the medications were necessary for Dorothy's condition, but the evidence against her was overwhelming, including recorded phone conversations where she discussed her plans to inherit Dorothy's estate and her frustration with having to wait for her mother to die naturally. The jury convicted Stephanie on all counts after deliberating for less than 3 hours, and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole, along with orders to pay complete restitution for all money she had stolen from Dorothy's accounts and to forfeit any claims to Dorothy's estate. The conviction also resulted in the invalidation of all legal documents that Dorothy had signed while under the influence of illegal drugs, restoring her original will that divided her estate equally between her children and returning control of her finances to court-appointed guardians who would protect her interests. Dorothy lived for 2 more years in a specialized care facility, enjoying visits from Michael and Grace while being protected from any contact with Stephanie, who spent her time in prison facing additional charges related to elder abuse cases involving other victims who had come forward after learning about her conviction. Grace's courage in exposing Stephanie's crimes led to changes in state laws regarding elder abuse detection and prevention, with new requirements for medical monitoring of elderly patients whose family members had sudden interest in providing care or making legal changes to estate plans. The case became a training example for healthcare workers and social services professionals about recognizing signs of elder abuse and the importance of advocating for vulnerable patients, even when the abuse is being perpetrated by trusted family members. Michael inherited his mother's house and used part of the estate to establish a foundation supporting elder abuse prevention and detection, honoring his mother's memory by protecting other elderly people from the kind of systematic abuse and exploitation that Stephanie had inflicted on their family. Years later, when other families facing similar situations would ask Grace how she had found the courage to expose such serious crimes against someone she loved, she would explain that her nursing oath required her to protect vulnerable patients regardless of family politics, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who claim to be providing care and protection to their victims.